Fabulous British countertenor, Andrew Watts. And accompanied by one of New York's best opera pianists, Michael Fennelly. You're going to hear more from them later. I want to first welcome you here to this wonderful apartment and thank our hosts, Jim St. George and Mark Sullivan. Where are you? Thank you. You know, I'm so glad he started with that Purcell. It's one of my favorites. And the text is really amazing. Music for a while shall all your cares beguile. And that's why we're all here. Music is so beguiling. And most of us know that. But how many times do you get a chance to go behind the scenes and hear from a composer about their vision for a work that they're almost totally complete with, and get a chance to meet the artists that they have worked with? That's what tonight is about. And I want to just introduce my fabulous wife, THEA Musgrave.
Sorted out. Just give me a second. I've got some notes that I need to remember what I was going to say, because at my age, you get a lot of senior moments. And so, just give me 1 sec. I got it all organized in here. I hope. And Peter gave me a strict program order. So I have to keep to that.
No.
Here we go.
THEA had a very interesting 45-year gestation period. with this work, and I
Well,
think she's going to
hush
tell
up,
you
I'm
about
going to
it.
tell you about it. In a minute. How about that? Can you hear? Is that good? Okay. This piece actually started in 1978, a while ago. Last summer, I was clearing out my studio and I came across a big bag of letters. Remember them? Letters? You know, and I thought, I need the space. I think I can chuck this all out, but I better just look through it quickly and make sure I'm not chucking out something interesting. So I was throwing it all out. All of a sudden a letter from Glyndebourne. Now, I don't know if Americans know what Glyndebourne is, but for us British people, Glyndebourne is a wonderful small opera house just outside London, which gives wonderful performances. So here was a letter from Glyndebourne, so that I didn't throw out, and I actually still have it, and it said, "Dear Miss Musgrave, would you be interested in writing an opera about Orlando?" And so I fortunately have my reply saved in the same bag of letters. And I looked quickly at this, and the letter said, "Thank you so much for your wonderful invitation." And of course I ran right away to reread the book, but the answer is no. I don't see how you can possibly make an opera out of Virginia Woolf's Orlando. A great book, but the ending goes all sort of abstract. And in an opera, I'm not quite sure how you would deal with that to make a good, satisfying ending. So I said, "I'm afraid I have to say no." Well, 20 years go by, and I'd forgot totally about it. And then one day, in the 1990s, I was looking at Dropbox, and I suddenly saw Orlando. I thought, what the hell's that? And then I sort of vaguely remembered something about, you know, having an invitation. I'd forgotten totally about it. And then I saw at the beginning of a libretto. What's that doing here? And then I thought, well, that's interesting, you know, maybe I'll do this one day. But I had a lot of other commissions, and the copyright wasn't free. Another 20 years go by. So we're now 40 years from thing. So the summer I was finding this letter, you know, is over 40 years old. So I write to my friend Matthew Epstein, very famous manager for Cami, who lives very close to us in the Ansonia, and I said, "Matthew, do you by chance have an email for this, the person, John Scott, who wrote this original letter?"
John Cox.
John Cox. And he said, "Well, this is an ancient email, but yes, I have it," and so I used it. I was in touch with this guy from now 40 years ago. So I said, you know, I might be writing an opera about Orlando. Now, when I look back at Dropbox, and I saw this original libretto that I started to sketch in. Again, I don't quite remember why I did it, because I didn't have any commission or anything. I'd given that away. And I saw amongst the characters was Virginia Woolf. What was Virginia Woolf doing there? And I suddenly realized maybe this is a way that I could make it work. And I'll go into more detail about that in a minute. So anyway, now we're in 2018, so 40 years after this original letter, and that is the year of my 90th birthday. And I thought, you know, this is really something. What was I going to say?
Well, the Financial Times interviewed you.
The what?
The Financial Times interviewed you.
Yes,
and
that's
what you
right.
told
I
them.
said, from now on, I'm going to do what the fuck I want to do. Giving an interview with the Financial Times. So I told them that, and the interviewer said, "I don't think I can put that word in, but I could put F, cross, cross, cross." I said, you know, whatever you have to. The Financial Times editor took out the crosses. So, you know, I became famous immediately. Not for the thing, but for letting off the F-bomb. Anyway, these 40 years went by. I think what brought back the idea in the 1990s, the 20-year wait, the first 20-year wait, was that Peter, my husband, had an invitation to conduct at Torre del Lago, Puccini's, well, it was his summer place, I think. He lived in Lucca, but he went there for the summer. And we were staying in the Torre del Lago, right on the edge of the lake. And my mind's gone.
And the piano that Puccini...
The piano, yeah, the piano that Puccini worked on, it was called Villa Orlando. That was a connection. That was a connection.
Right.
And I was started to work, not on Orlando, but whatever else I was being commissioned for, in downstairs of the Torre del Lago. And I felt Puccini was always sitting on my shoulder. No, that's no good. No, you can't do that. No, that won't do at all. So anyway, I decided then that I wasn't going to do Orlando, even though I'd started the libretto, till later when the copyright was clear. The copyright is actually only clear this January in this country. It was clear in Europe, but it's not clear in this country till right now, 2 months ago, 3 months ago, whatever, in January. Actually November, but the copyright goes year by year, so it counts from January. So, now, why would Virginia Woolf be interesting for me to have her as a character? I decided that she would be an actress, not a singer, an actress, and that it would be as if she was writing the opera, much as if I write the opera. So I'm there looking at my characters, so as I imagine Virginia Woolf would be looking at her characters on stage and deciding how it would work. So having her as an actress separates her from the others, so that she is a separate person. But also, she could help explain what the changeovers from one movement, one set to the next, and what is actually happening, and what were people saying, and so on. So it was very interesting. But to have a spoken character in the opera meant certain things. I had to be careful how to orchestrate it, so that and also it can't be done at the Met, obviously, because a spoken character would not be heard. It has to be done in a theatre where, you know, actresses can speak and be heard, but also where there's not room for a big orchestra. You know, there's usually there's a pit in a theatre that could maybe handle 10 instruments, but not 40 or 50. So therefore, it has to be done in a place where a speaker can be heard. But also, when I'm writing it, I have to be careful not to write music like bum 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 bum. That sort of stuff would not go well with a speaker trying to speak against it. So it's better to have da da da, something like that, smoother and basically out of the range of the spoken voice, so that the actress can be heard. So these are sort of technical things that you have to bear in mind. Now, during this time, yes, I decided to start. I did what the fuck I was going to do, and I started it right at the beginning of COVID, which is what, 2020, something like that. And I thought, well, this will keep me out of mischief. But I also had another commission at that time, and I'm going to play it to you. It's very long. It's all of 1 minute and 14 seconds, I think, though I'm not quite sure how Will plays it. I was commissioned by the BBC, as a lot of other composers were, to write a piece about COVID and what we're going through with COVID. And I called it Light at the End of the Tunnel. In other words, it'll be over eventually. and we're still not quite over it, so it does take a little bit of time. There's a young player here, Will Frampton, and Peter was a violist before he became a conductor, and has given his viola to Will. So Will Frampton is going to play Light at the End of the Tunnel. I think you'll see what I mean by light at the end of the tunnel when he plays. You see, it's a whole of 1 page long, if you can keep it up on the stand. The first thing, of course, when you write an opera is to have a libretto. And the libretto comes, first of all, the overall idea of what it's about. Scene 1, so-and-so meets so-and-so, and then something happens. And it's only later you begin to add in the words. But at the same time, there's also the visual element. And here I have the great pleasure of a friend of mine, Jenny Oken, who I met about the beginning of COVID, and I saw one of her operas that she had done the photographs for. There was a set which had sort of screens on, and they were filled with these marvelous pictures that made the set. Low Holdridge, La Dolce Rosa, which Placido originally conducted. And so here's Jenny Oken. I can talk a little bit about what you need for doing that.
So Thea and I have been talking for 4 years
Yes.
about this opera, and she is so comical about the libretto and so talented with blending the music with the words that I think that she liked the opera that I had done the sets for. There's some images on the screens over there. Yeah. Because what I did was I had different screens and I projected the images, and as the action moved from one side of the stage to another, I then changed the images very, very slowly, slow fades, so that by the time the music and the person coincide coincided with singing, the whole thing had changed and you didn't notice it. And I had some friends who came and they wanted to see how it changed and they could never do it, they forgot, because it was so slow. Anyway, but I feel very strongly about music and images, and I never wanted to do anything that interfered or even called attention to it, but it had to be very beautiful and very abstract. And I think that this idea that THEA has is that I can do abstractions in a way that will work with her opera.
Yeah.
So THEA was saying that she wanted one, I don't know if I can do it in front, she wanted one screen that was long, one short screen with a gap in there, and Virginia Woolf will be at her desk some of the time, and we'll be talking to Orlando, and then a lot of the musical opera takes place on the other side of the stage, so it means I can do this crossfade really easily, and I think she'll be happy.
So when I have a visual idea, for instance, there's one scene early on in Orlando, which is the great frost of what, 1610 was it? Early 17th century, where the entire Thames was frozen to 30 feet deep and stuff, and there were people having picnics on the ice with fires. Yes. And so I wanted Jen to be able to do that, to have a picture going far into the distance with these groups of people enjoying themselves on the ice. And that's what actually is happening, is that Orlando, aged 15, 16, in other words, we have to talk a moment about Orlando, but so we'll come back to that. Anyway, Jen said, I would love to work with you, and I said, I'm just about to work on Orlando, and would you be interested? I can't promise anything because I don't know who's going to do it.
Oh yeah,
but
I don't have the job. I don't have the job yet.
Neither do I. So it has been wonderful. It's always good to have, I always tell my students, learn whose brain to pick. Pick up the really smart people and pick their brains mercilessly, because however much we composers work with orchestras and individual players, there's no way we can know how every single instrument in the orchestra works in detail. You can't know that, with all 90 instruments, whatever, all the details. I remember once working with Nick Daniel, great friend and wonderful, wonderful oboe player, and I said, tell me if I've written anything awkward. Silence. We are great players, we can play anything that's written. And then, like 5 years later, he says to me, well, talking about something quite else, very difficult on the oboe. When you play a middle C, it's like this. But a C sharp, you have to move you can't go like this. You have to move your finger under the instrument. Why the fuck didn't you tell me that at the time? So when I come to a rehearsal with instruments, I not only listen, but I am watching. So when I see somebody, like this, and then suddenly have to do that, I say, what's that? And they say, it's C sharp to C sharp, or, whatever the note is. They've never told me, because I like to be practical with players so that it's always comfortable for them to play. And my ideal is that, for instance, I say to my students, if something sounds easy and it's horrendously difficult to play, do you think that's a good idea? Isn't it better to have something that sounds incredibly difficult and is relatively easy to play? That's what you need to work for. I try to follow my own advice. I'm not always successful. Jen, thank you so much. Great to see you here.
You're welcome.
And so on.
My books are over there if you want to see the artwork that I started
Talk
from.
about your books.
Oh, you've got something to show us?
Oh, no, this is 3 books. And over there are the stage sets that you can look at. But basically, I'm just an abstract person.
Yeah.
And I say yes to THEA all the time.
So the next next thing you do with the libretto, particularly something like Virginia Woolf's Orlando, there are so, and this is the reason why I said no in the first place, is there are so many different characters, and they go through the centuries. It starts in Elizabeth I, so 16th century, and then ends up in, she finished the book in 1928. So, you know, it goes through all the centuries like that. And there are all these different characters. How on earth are you going to handle that? And so that was the first thing I did when I decided I was going to, after all, attempt to do the libretto for this. And what I did was I made a cast sheet, which you can't see, but it looks like this. And what it is along the top, the various scenes that I worked out, the scenario, what happens in each scene. Virginia Woolf, who's there the whole time in red, Orlando as a man, and then as a woman. And then underneath I had singers, SATB, and then 4 supers, 2 women and 2 men. And what they do in each scene, and whether it would work, and how one would go to another, and was time for costume change from this scene to that scene, and so on. So I worked out the schedule for the actors and the singers. Underneath is the date, 16th century, 17th century, intermission, 18th, 19th, 20th. The transport would be horses and ending up with an aeroplane. And then an oak tree. In Virginia Woolf, Orlando also likes to write, like her boss, Virginia Woolf. So on the other side, yeah, Virginia Woolf is always stage left with a desk and a large waste paper basket filled to the brim with thrown out bits of paper. And Orlando has set up a little desk over here, something similar. And what was I going to say? I keep having these bloody senior moments. Anyway, yes, the oak tree happens when she is writing, when Orlando, he is writing, it happens here, 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 and here, through the thing. The oak tree grows. So it's first a little sort of shoot, but the last time it happens, right at the very end, it's a huge trunk. Jen, that was your idea.
Yes, dear.
Thank you. So you see, you have to pick your brains carefully, know whose brains to pick. So there's my cast sheet. Now, the next thing is I talked about the size of the house for actresses. Of course, they can have a little mic that would help, but so it has to be the size of a normal theatre where an actress can be heard, obviously, and where there's a pit where you can have instruments. So not 40 or 50 instruments, which would actually be much easier to write, but I had just 10 instruments, 3 strings, 3 winds, percussion, harp, doubling, a synthesizer, what else, a horn. Anyway, it adds up to 10. And so that's what I did, and I showed you the cast sheet. Now, the next thing is that my publisher, when they heard about it, and some of my publishers are here, but not Jill Graham, who lives in London, and she said, this is very interesting, because Orlando changes from a man to a woman halfway through. So the early part of the opera, when Orlando has a soprano voice, therefore things happen when he is 15, 16, I think voices change around that time, and so they can't be much older than that. And then halfway through, she becomes a woman, and then the second act, it's a she. And Jill Graham said, why don't you do it for a countertenor? And I thought, wow, that's a wonderful idea. One problem, however, it begins off, and Orlando has a terrific, it's really Sasha she has a crush on, but before that there was Euphrosyne, she visits Queen Elizabeth I, played by the baritone in good English pantomime style, where there's always a wicked witch and always played by a man. Americans, I don't think, understand our tradition in that, but anybody British would know that.
We're catching on.
You're catching on. Okay. And where the fuck was I? I've forgotten what it was.
Well, you're describing
I have
the
senior
various
moments.
scenes. Jill introduced you to Andrew
Right.
Ross. And you decided to write this for countertenor.
I thought, yes, so here's the problem. The first two scenes, first of all, Andrew is in the court of Elizabeth I and meets Euphrosyne, who is sort of an assistant and so on and so on, and falls a bit in love with that. But it doesn't go very far because very quickly after we have the great frost of 1610, I think it was, when the Thames was frozen 20 feet deep, and I've talked a little bit about that. And that's when Orlando meets Sasha and falls deeply in love. Major, major crush. And then, of course, what happens is that the frost is eventually over and the big rainstorm comes. Yes, they were going to run off together. And the night that they were going to run off, Orlando comes on and looks for Sasha. And suddenly he feels raindrops on his head. And what has happened is that Sasha's father has locked her in the cabin, and therefore she cannot join him. And he doesn't know that. But through his life, he learns, or he begins to realize there's been male interference with his ideas. So, the other thing that's very awkward about what happens then, Orlando is escaping the clutches of some woman and gets the, I forget which king, Charles something, to send him off to Constantinople, as it was called then, to escape. And he became an ambassador. Here's the trouble. Orlando is a man, and if it's played by a countertenor, supposedly only 16 or 17 years old. Well, you can't exactly have an ambassador, with a soprano voice, age 16, in Constantinople. So I thought, oh, this is really, I can't do this. And then I suddenly had the idea of how I could do this. And so this is what I mean about working out problems in the libretto. What happens is that when you see the set, first of all, there are distant views of Constantinople as the boat arrives, and the Sophia, or the blue, all the various wonderful pictures that you can see to set up Constantinople. But eventually you come to the embassy, and you are in the garden of the embassy, and behind the garden there's a wall with flowers, and then you can see some distant spires and so on. And then on the left, stage right, there's a big building which is the entrance to the embassy, and on the second floor there's a window with a big chandelier hanging and a sort of a party going on there. So you have people talking about the party, and there's somebody who has just arrived from London to decorate the ambassador with his wonderful work that he has been doing, and his daughter, and they are discussing this. And then the daughter says, this is a wonderful party, I've seen all sorts of things, but so strange, I haven't seen the ambassador. And I hear that he goes out every night. How is that? And the father says, of course, Orlando's going out to see all his girlfriends. But so the father doesn't quite know how to say that to his young daughter. He said, I think we better go inside now, and avoids that bit of conversation. But anyway, so that can explain what happens then. A little bit later, the scene goes dark, and this figure comes in, and picks up a big envelope that he has. This is Orlando coming back from one of his visits, and goes off into his office where there's a chaise longue, and he lies down and falls fast asleep. And at that moment, some people come in and say, there's rioters coming. And Orlando sleeps through it all, and the rioters arrive, and they come in, and they see him sleeping, so they don't do anything, but they pick up a crown that's been brought to decorate him, and some cash that they find, and then eventually they get out, and then Orlando finally wakes up. I should say that all through, Virginia Woolf is always on stage left, watching. It's as if she is imagining her libretto being done, roughly what I do. So she's watching this, and Orlando, who's here, wakes up and turns to Virginia Woolf and says, I'm going to demonstrate this, but it's a secret. I had the most extraordinary dream, and he sees that Virginia Woolf is staring at his breast. Ah! He sees he has a very glamorous bra on, well filled, I mean bright red or bright silver or something. And then the query comes in with a letter about how Orlando is going out with all these women, and sees this and doesn't understand, and Orlando goes, ah! And then he turns to the audience, and hopefully they're laughing, and he says, ah! And turns upstage, and the curtain comes down with his back to the audience. So that is the transformation of Orlando into a woman. A few other things just to tell you, and then I'm going to have Andrew join me and have some questions for him. But Virginia Woolf is really always in charge. So the very opening, I wanted to set it up that the very beginning of the opera, the orchestra of 10 assembles, and the conductor comes on and was clapping, and then the conductor is just about to start when the lights go off of him and go to stage left. And Orlando's Virginia Woolf comes on with her husband and says, darling, I'm just going on this trip, but I'll be finished with this libretto. Oh, what's that? Well, it's Orlando, you remember, I told you all about that. But have a wonderful trip, and I'll tell you all about it when you get back. At that moment, Orlando, as an actor, comes on and says to Virginia Woolf, I want to be part of this show. I want to be the part. I want to do Orlando. And Virginia Woolf says, but the first act, age 16, well, I can do that. Yes, I guess you can. And this is to set up, who is actually going to be Orlando. And then Virginia Woolf settles down and fixes her papers, and then she looks at the conductor and then says, now you may begin. Of course, it's normally the other way around. The conductor tells the singer, now you can begin. But I wanted Virginia Woolf to be in charge. And that's one way I did it with the libretto. So, now let me introduce Andrew, who you've already heard. He's going to sing an aria from, if I can find it. Yeah, he's going to sing an arrangement. It's not quite the same aria that we have in the opera, but it's when he's now a woman and he's in Constantinople.
You have to use your imagination.
And he's going to go back to London, and he had one pearl left from his necklace to pay a captain of a boat who's going to take him back to London. So this is the aria that he sings when he's on the boat, going back to London. And he's sort of saying, you know, what's this to be a woman? Can't do this and I can't do that. You know, what the hell can I do? And I've lost Sasha, who was the love of my life, and, you know, what am I going to do about that? So show us what you're going to do.
Okay. we should say that this is a world premiere.
Yes!
and cleverly arranged by Michael. So good luck. To us all. To us all.
I'm just going to describe one other scene, which I call the blah blah scene. When Virginia Woolf is gradually teaching Orlando how to behave as a woman, which he doesn't always do that well,
No.
to begin with, and doesn't really want to, but has to. And there is a party. Now, in this party, I have basically all the cast on stage, the 4 singers, 3 singers of the 4, and the 4 supers. Now, of course, the supers are not supposed to sing, even if they can. And I decided that I was going to do something pretty crazy, which is I would have them all sing, but by gestures. And each voice would be represented by an instrument. So one instrument, one person would have the clarinet going, and then there would be a flute for somebody else, whatever. So that's what I did. And how we, the audience, would know what was being said is that Virginia Woolf would be talking to Orlando, saying, oh, there's Mrs. So-and-so, she talks for hours. And then Orlando says, and doesn't say anything at all. And then somebody else is talking about how she always sneezes because there's a cat has been lying on the sofa. And then the cymbal goes, psh, and then one of the characters does a sneeze. So that this builds up. And then all of a sudden, it gets very, very strident and very out of order. And Orlando comes down and points to the conductor, what's going on? You know, and the conductor does this and they suddenly stop, you know, like MSNBC suddenly stops and they all are frozen with a gesture. And so Orlando, what's going on here? And Virginia, the conductor points to Virginia Woolf. So Orlando, what am I going to do? So Orlando goes up to Virginia Woolf and takes out the manuscript and looks through. Oh my God, this is boring. And it goes on, and then points to the conductor. Why don't we go to here? And you know, and the conductor says, yeah, good idea. Okay, so that's what happens. Then Orlando backs off, and Virginia Woolf wakes up. What's going on here? Oh, Orlando, that was beautiful. Thank you so much. Then, right after that, there's something I just want to tell you about. Orlando has a very difficult moment with somebody who comes to visit. It doesn't go at all well. And he says to Virginia Woolf, I'm going out into the park now to walk. No, you can't do that. I'm going anywhere. No, wait a minute. Don't do that. You're a woman. It's not safe for you. Wait a minute, I have an idea. Oh, yeah? Yeah. Why don't we dress you up as a man? Oh, that's interesting. And then I said to Andrew, how about we do that on stage? Is that possible? And he said, yes.
Yep.
So what I have is the stage hands, you know, the dressers from backstage, dressed just in jeans and whatever, and dress him up as a man. And, you know, put the wig on and you know, take the skirt off and have the pants on underneath, just what they would do backstage. You see it on stage, and Andrew said it'd be interesting for an audience to see how you do that. And of course, to pass the time, I have Virginia Woolf describe what's going on, so you're not just, you're watching you, but also Virginia Woolf is describing what's happening. So I thought that was also very interesting. And there's one other thing I want to talk about, and that is later when Andrew, I should say, Orlando is now dressed as a man and goes into the park, eventually meets the love of his life, Shelmadine, and they are talking, and Shell is saying, I'm off to South America, I'm off to Patagonia. Why are you doing that? What for? Oh, to discover the unknown things. Well, isn't that dangerous? Well, it's very dangerous, you know, when in the wintertime, of course, and then describes all the terrible things that could happen. And Orlando says, but it's October now. It's winter coming. Not in Patagonia. So I have an aria, summer in December and winter in June. And I checked with my South African friend, is that really true? It's summer in December and winter in June? And she said, yes, that's for sure. So I rather like the idea of having an aria, summer in December and winter in June, the wonders of our world. So I think that's where I'm. Oh yes, one other thing I need to talk to you about, and that is there's a big aria at the end, just before the end, before the final, thing, which is one bit I haven't written, where Orlando has a big aria, and I thought it'd be really nice to have another color. So I thought, how about having the cor anglais, English horn, who doubles the oboe, play this aria. And then I thought I'd better just check with my dear friend Nick Daniel, wonderful oboe player. I said, what happens, can you use an instrument that's been sitting there since the beginning of the opera? Does it need to be warmed up in any way? Is it okay to suddenly have this aria with a really important solo? And he came back with a very interesting answer. He said, wonderful that you thought about this. I think what you should do, just a few bars before, is have the English horn player double up the horn or a clarinet for several bars, just to get so nobody will hear it, but you get the player, to make sure the reeds are in place and the instrument is sounding. Wonderful practical advice. So as I said to my students, always pick people's brains. You have to pick the right brains though. So that's what happened. Then in this aria with the cor anglais, Orlando is talking about those dark moments that we all have to face, as well as the light moments, and how we have to deal with those dark moments. And then here's a remark, which is Virginia Woolf's, of course, which I've stolen, and I think is absolutely wonderful. I can't remember just exactly what the words are, but it's roughly, in those dark moments, you can sometimes plant something, but then you have to wait for the light to watch it grow. And that's something sometimes can be a wonderful and beautiful idea which can bring us all peace and hope. And that's the idea I love and that I've stolen to use in the final aria. So. If you have questions.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
So I just wanted to make a point here that I only met Thea on Monday.
I know him very well.
This week we worked together on Jill Graham of Wise Music put Thea and I together as a sort of like a help centre for insane musicians, and we've Zoomed every week, if not twice a week in some weeks, for the last 2 years. And I know it's kind of bizarre, and it wasn't until I'm in New York. I've been doing concerts with the New York Phil, and that was okay. But actually, I got to meet THEA MUSGRAVE in the flesh. And what's really interesting for me as a singer who's sung lots of contemporary music and premieres and stuff and commissioned things, is the human aspect and the kindness that THEA brings to everything that she writes and everything she has to say. And every time we speak, I go away feeling like I'm a better human being because I'm in the presence of someone who drops the F-bomb more than I do, for a start. And actually, she doesn't give a fuck. She does what she does. And that's the individuality of it. And I have been privileged to have read through this score, read the libretto, sung through most of it in my head, seen what the orchestration is. And I stake my reputation as being someone who has a finger on the pulse. This is shit hot stuff, to quote THEA. I've not said this. Would you like to hear that extract again?
Yeah.
Because I think it leads itself just to, we were talking about Orlando. I mean, I've got other things I want to sing, it's fine, but I just think it's really important that we, now you've heard a bit about it, well, I've been in New York too long, oh my God, sure. How many R's in sure? Is that okay, Michael, if we do it again, if I can? Just have another listen to it and just immerse yourself in the way in which THEA's own libretto, because it was she who wrote the words and the tunes, turns this sort of drama, this escapade, into something very, very simple. And as THEA said, it's the story of goes to the viola piece, the light at the end of the tunnel. It's all being kind, and let's face it, in the world we're living in, a little bit of kindness would be lovely. And then I can get the phrase right that I got wrong. Yeah. Yeah, the same key, lovely. Oh, thanks.
Oh, she held captive, when controlling her, take her, oh, she would do. And her, she could love, yes, yes. I understand. That is what happened. I will not let that happen to me. I will choose my love. I choose the life I will live. Yes, yes, I will decide. Well, we're wondering if you have any questions for Thea or for Andrew.
I should wait for everyone else, but I have a lot of questions.
I have a question.
Yes.
I'm wondering if there are any vocal changes that you've made, I don't know if you can hear me, the transition from being a man to a woman, if that's in any way
Can you hear?
reflected in the,
Right, to repeat the question, she's asking whether you are approaching your voice differently as a man and as a woman.
No, I think the question is whether Thea, in the composing of this,
Oh,
if you made changes
sorry, I didn't.
to the writing of Orlando as a man and Orlando as a woman. Are there changes?
Well, it's different because Orlando in the first act is 16 years old or 15 years old, so
Which I do really well.
yes. And so he's very quick to do things and very argumentative and rushes off to do this, that, the next thing. Was as an adult he might just take a little bit more time to consider what is the best thing to do, maybe. And so there's that difference. But I don't think so.
If I may say, I think that what happens is Orlando as a woman becomes more, there's a more a legato, more of a sort of embracing feminine wiles. It has a lot more legato to it than Orlando as a man who's just sort of going out with his girls all the time. So no, what we haven't done is gone, here's Orlando, and there's Orlando. We haven't done any of that, we kept it the same. You know, it's often voices change, and we're also living in a world of many people transitioning, and the voices don't change generally, or they do depending on how their position is.
okay, thank you.
But also things change through the centuries. You know, how women are treated. Because when you're not allowed to go into the park
Yeah.
alone, Hyde Park, you know, that was then, not now.
I have a question for Thea about orchestration and the piano transcription. The
What's that?
piano is gorgeous, but I'm wondering if you wrote the orchestra first and then did this.
Greta is wondering, since the piano sounds wonderful, whether you wrote the piano first or whether you wrote the instrumentals
The instruments come first.
because of the
In a
color.
way, it's more difficult in this circumstance to do just 10 instruments, but as I say, it has to fit into a theatre as opposed to an opera house, so I can't have 40 players, which would be much easier to write for. But no, I hear the instruments, and I decide I must write them now before I forget. You know, I forget very easily, as you've seen. So then somebody else, like Michael, made this piano reduction, and not always very easy because, you know, it's not written to just lie under a piano hands. But Michael did a wonderful job of doing what 10 instruments could do. I think I saw another hand go up.
Yes.
Hopefully you can hear me. I was wondering a bit about your compositional process and the way you find your material. Meaning, like, do you work at the piano, or do you just work right into pencil and paper? And ultimately, how do you go about finding the notes and material you'll then craft into this piece?
He's wondering about the compositional process and whether you write at the piano or elsewhere, or how you conceive of things and what your process is.
Well, the thing is, I've lost my hearing, so I have these hearing aids, thank God, which sort of help a little bit, but they're not perfect. So I actually do most of my work in my head at a desk, and I write in a short score. And so because you know, to write it out in full score takes a lot of paper, so I do it reduced into a short score, 4 or 5 lines maybe. You know, here's the flute, and then the clarinet comes in here, and then the strings come in here. So it's laid out for instruments. And then I do the full score, where you have to lay out the instruments properly, what they can really do and what the bowing is for the violin, and the dynamics to make it all work, and how it balances with the voices. But you have, you know, the moment-to-moment score, but you also have the long-term score of where the movement or the section or the opera, where it's going. So you have both things to consider. So if you want your big climax here, you don't have it all here. You build towards it. You have to have both these things in mind. And both my teachers, I had some wonderful teachers. I studied in Paris with Nadia Boulanger for 4 years, which was absolutely fabulous. And she was always looking from moment to moment. What happens here? Why is that bassoon there? Why is that? Where is that going? But at the same time, I have a wonderful teacher that I never met. And I don't know whether his name is familiar here in America. Donald Francis Tovey. He was the professor at Edinburgh University, where I did my MUSGRAVE degree and before I went to Paris. But he went and died before I got there. But what he was always thinking of was a long-term harmonic journey. In other words, he wasn't just thinking from, of course he thought from moment to moment as well, but he was thinking in longer terms and how you handle that. And I find that absolutely fascinating in all sorts of ways, even in making words, you know, for an opera. Just how you do that, the long term and the short term. And also something very interesting. I once had a very difficult lesson with Nadia, and I just had a terrible week, and I just, you know, words didn't happen. It sort of was just, and I'm sure people who write and work know what I mean about that. Horrible. So I came and said I had what do you call it?
Writer's block.
Writer's block. Thank you. Writer's block. You know what she said? Here's how you handle that. So I was very interested. She said, you'll go home, and through the next week, I had a lesson every single week. She said, every single day, you will write a complete piece. Quite short, but a complete piece. But here's the important thing. It does not matter how bad it is. In other words, she was realizing that I was having Puccini or whoever it was sitting on my shoulder. That's no good. No, that's no good. You can't work that way. You have to, it's always, how about this? If I don't do that, then I could do that. And oh, how about that? Rather than, oh, that's no good. It's an attitude. And I think that if you're a composer, remember that. It came from her, but I find it very useful.
Yes.
The other thing I find very useful, I'm speaking to composers now, but hopefully other people will be interested. I have what I call the cat sat on the mat syndrome, which is what I use. And it's this. When you're writing every day, you come to a point you know you've really finished what you can do for the day. And you know exactly what you're going to write. But you do not write it down. So the next morning you come back to work, if you're a morning person, and you say, here I got, or here, oh yes, the cat sat, yes, on the mat, of course, and then the dog bit the mailman, you know, but you don't write the mailman down. So that you know when you start work the next day, you have a very easy entrance back into the flow of what you're writing, because you've left it there from your thought from the previous day, and then you do your work, which is made 2-3 hours, whatever, and then the same thing, you come to a point, I know exactly what I'm going to write now, don't write it. I once went round the world, having not written down the mat, you know, the cat sat, and I went round the world, and we went to Japan, we went to Hong Kong, we went to Thailand, we went round India, we came back, and the cat sat. Oh, on the mat, of course. And then the dog, I was back into it. I tell you, that's true. That's what happened. So, composers, that's very good advice, I'm telling you.
Anyone else have any questions?
Any more questions?
I have 2 questions.
Oh my God. Watch out.
One for you, Thea, and one for Andrew. Has it occurred to you that people like Verdi ended their major operatic oeuvre with a comedy? And you did begin with a comedy, but everything else has really been quite serious. And now this is a very lighthearted, it's a very serious subject, but you've handled it in a witty and lighthearted way. I wonder if what's changed in your life, or do you feel differently about this opera because it's a comedy?
Comedies are far, far, far more difficult to write than tragedies. So, because you have to have a much more accurate sense of timing and clarity and to set it up right. So it's more difficult. But I don't know, with this, I didn't really mean to write it, but because of this letter that arrived 40 years ago, you know, and then it was sort of sitting in the back of my mind, I thought, how am I going to make this work? You know, how am I going to do Constantinople with a 16-year-old being the ambassador? How am I going to do that? And then I thought, you know, I can make use of this. And some of the wonderful things that Virginia Woolf, which I've stolen, of course, I mean, the book is very much based on her, but not the ending, because she goes all abstract. And I wanted to keep it down with the relationship with Orlando and Shelmerdine, which she doesn't really do. She also gives Orlando a kid. I'm not sure if it's 9 months after he's left, but I'm not quite sure, I can't remember the dates. But anyway, absolutely nothing about how you're going to take care of the kid. What are your ideas about bringing up a kid? Nothing. So I cut it out. I didn't give you a kid, I'm sorry.
Good.
You had a question for
Andrew, I think there's a tradition in the Baroque period of men singing with higher voices, but the countertenor hasn't really appeared, it seems to me, in popularity until the revival of Handelian works. I wonder if you could just go through that, because that people may not know that history, and because the gender issues are so front and center in Orlando and so topical now. And there have alwaes been heroic men singing leading roles in the Baroque period. How did we get from the castrati
Well, it's
to the
interesting
countertenor?
that even in the Baroque era, there's an opera by Pallavicino called L'Antiope, in which the countertenor is the best friend of the queen. So he's disguised himself as a woman and then is revealed to be a man. So we've been doing cross-dressing and gender reveals for quite a long time. The castrati all died out and it was no longer. Alessandro Moreschi at the turn of this century was the last known castrato. If you ever hear him singing Ave Maria, it'll make you cry, because it's the most extraordinary thing. And in fact, Karajan asked the Vatican if Moreschi could go and sing Erde in Wagner's Ring Cycle, and that never happened. And then all of a sudden there was a dearth of countertenors. Everybody stopped. Everyone was in the church choirs and nobody stepped out the front until a British guy called Alfred Deller turned up. And he tells a story. I was very fortunate enough to work with his son Mark, and Mark tells a story of Alfred standing in the festival hall, this tall man, this beard like this, and saying, well, and this woman kept saying, Mr. Deller, you are eunuch. No, madam, I am unique. So that's, that we as, apropos of that, another story for me personally at the age of 19, standing up singing Israel and Egypt. I sang the first phrase, and the mother in the rehearsal, the mother of the conductor was sitting sort of 3 seats away from me, and I stood up and sang, and she. And that was my introduction. People often say, "What do you sound like when you speak?" Well, it'd be really hard if I spoke up there all the time. It'd be really annoying. So Alfred Deller turned up, and then it was okay for men to sing high. Alfred Deller came. James Bowman turned up, God rest his soul. Michael Chance, Christopher Robinson, and then it happened on this side of the pond, because it was traditionally a British thing to be a countertenor. The great Russell Oberlin, American countertenor, suddenly appeared, and in fact, it was that relationship between Oberlin and Deller that made Deller stop singing, because Deller was due to sing Midsummer Night's Dream at Covent Garden, and Covent Garden had a deal to do it at the Met and wanted an American, and Russell came in to do that show, and Alfred said, it's now time to stop. And he was right, it was time to stop. And if you ever get a chance to read a book called A Singularity of Voice, it's the Deller biography. I think it's one of the 2 books I've read in my life, being a singer. It's extraordinary. And now it seems that there's a whole plethora of countertenors. And the lovely thing about the countertenor voice is every single one of us is different. It's not a stock soprano. And the countertenor voice stays as the countertenor. I don't become... I start as the young countertenor, I'm still the countertenor. I don't become the old lady on the left. Maybe I do, who knows. I can see that happening. I got described recently as the veteran countertenor. I'm not sure what that means, but I want to kill that critic. But it's that, so we're on a journey now, and it's fascinating that in fact, Tuesday night, El Nino of John Adams opens with 3 countertenors in it, 3 cover countertenors. I've met more countertenors this week than I'd like to. All of whom are really talented and can really sing. So I hope I get this job. So it has changed, and it's more acceptable for us to sing and also to be big men. The fact is that we are male, and it's not about sexuality. It's a male voice, and I think it's fantastic that it's become more accepted and more readily done, and everybody can do it. Some do it better than others. Simple as that. Everyone goes, Yahoo! Everyone, can all the men in the room do that for me? Yahoo! Very good. Welcome to Countertenors. There was quite a couple of good ones at the back. Leave now. But it's just a vocal thing. Is you're using the top part of your chords, and it's not a false voice. People use the word falsetto. There's nothing false about it. People say the chords don't close. Well, I've got video footage of mine closing quite happily. All people make that noise in very different ways. So I'm thrilled to be a countertenor. I'm looking forward to being 16 again in your opera.
Yeah. And by the way, I remember asking if he had a good scream for me when he becomes a woman. He said, I have a very good scream for you.
I do. I shan't demonstrate it now.
So in the Baroque period, I hope you all understand what castrati means, is castrated males. Those kids that had the
Get out the kitchen knife.
those kids that had the best voices in the church choirs were castrated so that they kept a female range of voice, but their bodies grew and they therefore had tremendous lung power and were able to sing all the heroic roles in the Baroque repertoire. But that sort of died out.
It has died out, although there is a caste in India where they still do castrate, and it's a particular religious sect, and they do all speak up there, which is kind of fascinating.
But you primarily sing contemporary opera, but you of course also do Baroque opera.
Yeah, the nice thing about the council, we have Baroque, now we even have Mozart. I do Clemens de Dieu in the Staatsoper in Vienna next year, and we have contemporary music. We have a little bit of Strauss even. I've just done a Fledermaus. We go into the 21st century and really new repertoire, and in fact, every day people are writing new stuff for us, which is great. There's a question.
You and Peter are using two different words. Peter's saying castrati. You're using castina.
I'm using
C-A-S-T-I-N-A?
No. Castrati.
He's saying countertenor.
countertenor and castrati.
Countertenor is the modern male, untampered with.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The reason I'm asking is that in 1924, I believe it was, my grandfather published a book called Venus Castina. And it's a history of men impersonating women. And it has a long chapter about the whole history of countertenors at that time, before Deller was working. I've always wondered where the term castina in his book title came from. But I thought you were using it.
Castina, no, I don't
It's
think
not,
we
it's
did.
not a word I've ever used or
No.
associated with this.
What he says in the book is that there was a Greek supernatural belief that there was an avatar of Venus who was specifically an avatar for men who are performing as women, and that was Venus Castina or Venus Castina.
Well, it's a very long tradition, Shakespearean
He
tradition. I guess it just won't be done in Florida. But I really hope that we get this work done, because THEA did what she wanted to do, but that meant that she refused other commissions and spent these years on it. And I think you can tell she is really into this work, and it's wonderful. It's almost finished. We actually have, I want to introduce THEA's publishers here. Peggy Monastra from Schirmer's, over here. And by her side is Andrew Stein-Zeller. Right? So any of you producers in the room, speak to them when we break, okay? And let's help get this done. On the other hand, we have had a donation of $50,000 towards the first production of this work. And if any of you are interested to support this effort, by all means, make yourself known to me or to the publishers afterwards, or whatever you want to do at any level. But I think you've got some feeling of what motivated THEA to write this, how long it took her to commit to this without a commission. The commission gives you a salary for the 4 years you spend working on that. That isn't as important as anchoring the first performance. So by doing what the fuck she wanted to do, we're not sure where the fuck it is going to wind up.
But we should fucking get it going.
But we want to get it going. So that's what I was thinking. Andrew, if you're not too tired and feel like it, I wonder if you would offer something of the rest, something else from your repertoire.
Okay, I'll give you one aria, how's that?
Oh, yeah.
Because I think then we need a drink.
Right, he's just sung a very, very difficult work with the New York Philharmonic, written by Olga Neuwirth. And he flew here, if you can imagine, from London on Monday. Rehearsals, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, opening Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. We rehearse together on Saturday, and here he is on Sunday. Tomorrow, he has just become the head of the International Vocal Foundation competition. VFC, which is the largest Dutch competition. And he is holding auditions here in this very room tomorrow from 10 to about 3. And you're all invited. And then on Tuesday, he's going to work with THEA through the second act, and then fly back to London.
Sleep all the way home.
So, how he packed all of this in and isn't sort of dropping on the floor, I don't know. But he's generously offered to sing, and that's what we want to do here.
You might
right?
know this one.
From di tenere e belle del mio palazzo l'ho amato, per voi risplenda il famo. Tu grande dolcelle, non oltraggi mai la cara pace, ne giunge a profanare
refreshments, drinks, and absolutely speak with our artists, all of them. Have fun, thanks for coming.